Hello and welcome to Man's Model Moments. In today's video I'm going to be looking at Airfix's long anticipated 1/48 scale tooling of the Fairey Gannet, an aircraft that, although innovative, could perhaps be best described as fugly. Whatever you think of it, we have the box here in our hands, so let's have a good look at what's inside. The box itself is very sturdy, and the same size as that used by Airfix for other kits, such as the Buccaneer. Inside we have the familiar full box experience that we've come to anticipate from Airfix. The first bag contains 2 sprue frames, plus a separately bagged transparency frame. Under that we have a second bag containing another set of paired frames. And then the final bag contains 3 frames, one slightly smaller than the others. At the bottom we have our instruction book, inside which is the large decal sheet with its cover paper, which we will tackle separately. So let's have a look in a bit more detail. Loose within the inner page of the instructions are the 2 glossy sheets for the paint schemes, and again we'll look at these in more detail afterwards. Going back to the instructions, these are in standard Airfix A4 format with all the usual warnings and symbol definition outlines on the inner page. The first thing that struck me about this booklet though was how light it was, and looking through it runs to just 10 sheets. Now that is half the amount of paper that was used in the comparable Sea King release earlier this year, and Airfix seemed to have achieved that by making the instruction steps much smaller. I'm really not sure about this, as I think they do detract from their ease of use. Now I wanted to be absolutely sure about this, so here are the Gannet and Sea King booklets side by side. Same photo, no tricks, this is a direct comparison. Half the number of steps on the page for the Sea King, larger and therefore much clearer illustrations. Now that point aside, the actual steps in the instructions are what we've come to expect from Airfix. Clear and with good use of colour to call out elements throughout the build. A really nice touch is the weighting instructions. Though they do supply parts for holding this, only one of them is called out in the booklet, which seems odd. Apart from this anomaly, the instructions progress through in a logical fashion and call out paint, options and decals required throughout. There are also a lot of options with this kit. Obviously there is the usual landing gear up or down, and if you choose to have it flying, you can also display with the search radar deployed. Part of the unusual aspect of the Gannet was of course its tri-fold wing, which is one of the main options in the kit, along with flaps in up or down configuration. You can also display the bomb bay open, which gives you a variety of weapons to choose between as well to cap it off. Another notable point is the inclusion of pilots in this kit, which I'll come back to when covering the plastic. So the instructions are a bit of a mixed bag for me, but I'll cover that in the conclusion. For the paint and decal schemes we have Airfix's black and white sheet covering common elements, and then we have 3 sides with glossy full colour 4-view renders. These cover 3 British aircraft liveries, with some variety between them, though all are in the same sky and extra dark sea grey scheme used by post-war naval aircraft. There's not much to say about Airfix's cartograph decals these days, as they're always flawlessly printed and extremely comprehensive, covering all the variants, lettering and markings, though some people may be surprised not to see the identification stripes for the 847 Naval Squadron included. So let's start off with frame A, and get right into the meat of it with the main fuselage, which is beautifully rendered. We also have the main cockpit floor here, and the absolutely stunning weapons bay, which is simply gorgeous. We also have structural elements here, including the very rigid box and wing spar piece, which is an increasingly common and welcome assembly in many kits these days. Moving on to the wings, Airfix supply two complete sets of wings. These, which are for the deployed state, and the folded ones, which we'll see shortly, which is really nice and saves a lot of fiddly joins for those who want the wings out. They also feature great detail, as we'll see in the close-ups. For the folded wings you get two entire frames, which also include elements like internal framing, horizontal stabilizers and control surfaces. Once again, there is fantastic detail over the surfaces here, and some on the reverse for the landing gear bays too. The second frame is just a mirrored version of the prior for the other side. Next we come to frame E, which hosts a huge variety of small and delicate pieces, as well as gear bay doors, and the nicely weighted main wheels. Overall, the impression is of some great finesse in production here. Frame J is all about weapons. Lots of weapons. Rockets, bombs, depth charges, and so on. You've got it all here, and they all look very nice indeed. Our last frame is actually 3 frames in one, but the central one of these has our crew. You also have a lot of the cockpit elements here, like seats and such. We also have engine elements and the 2 propellers. We also have some very fine pieces, as well as the front wheels, and once again, detail throughout is very good. To show how good will be down to the close-ups, but just as an example, these pieces, like this antenna here, are very fine. Last up is the clear sprue with the 3 blown canopies. You also get 2 versions of the windscreen, with and without wiper, and a whole bunch of other smaller pieces for various lights and so on. Staying with the transparencies to start with, these are crystal clear, which I can demonstrate as usual by sliding my trusty Swan & Morton scalpel underneath. Even through the sides you can still see well, despite the obvious optical distortion with all the curves. Looking at the windscreen, however, we come to the first fly in the ointment, or rather, the inclusion in the canopy. I've zoomed in here so you can see it. Slap bang in the middle of the windscreen is this black speck, contained within the plastic, so obviously a manufacturing fault. Now obviously there is a second canopy, but it's without the wiper. Another email to Hornby support lies ahead. The rest of the transparencies are flawless. And include some really small pieces that we'll have to ensure the carpet monster doesn't get. Moving on to the main plastic, I mentioned how fine the casting is in the parts here, and so here's that antenna I showed before. The instrument panel is very detailed, with recessed dials awaiting the decals included. The other cockpit elements here all look fantastic too, with a wealth of detail that would be difficult to see in the finished model. Seats are well rendered, though only one of these is used in the kit, potentially indicating other versions in the future. Another of the nicely detailed stations is shown here. And then we're onto the crew. You get 3 of these, all with the same sitting on the toilet pose. Not that it will be seen when they're in the model, but these did have quite large and variable sink marks in their sides, as you can see here. That's despite them having hollowed backs, and it isn't regular either. Other kit components here don't have such issues, these side consoles all having good detail. The props and their associated cones, backs and so on are all precisely cast and look good. The front landing gear and these struts are all perfect. Here you can see that rivet detail for the front landing gear doors. And again, here you can see the finesse on some of these thin parts. This is also shown in the casting of the front wheels with their hub detail. Moving on to frame E, this finesse carries on being displayed throughout. And then we come to one of the wing folds, and you can see just how much detail has been included here. The landing gear bays have separate sidewalls to capture all of the detail required, which is a great way to do this. Further to that, you also have additional elements like these bottles which go into the bays. Here you can see the rivet detail on the various bay doors. And here are those nicely weighted wheels again. No detail in the hubs, because those are separate parts, allowing you to paint them separately. Bravo Airfix for that. Just moving over the rest of the frame, I hope you can see the standard is maintained throughout. Onto the weapons sprue. And I have no idea what the majority of these are, whether mines, torpedoes, depth charges or sonobuoys, but I do know that they are all very nicely represented on this frame. Connection points are also nice and small, which is a good thing. I like the way the moulds here have been designed to ensure proper casting as well, and once again we have some very delicate pieces represented. 2 big weapons and wing mounts later. And we come to the rockets. These have their heads moulded in 2 pieces, with the fins separate. The mounts for the rockets are also commendably thin. Next we're looking at control surfaces, and on all of these you should be able to see the very finely recessed detail present, even on the little finlets on the horizontal stabilizers. You can also see one of the bomb bay doors here, which doesn't escape treatment either. Moving to the wings, the detail on these is just gorgeous. Not all the riveting is recessed either. These panels actually have raised rivets on them. You can see more of that lovely detailing continue on these wing sections too. The complete wings are identical in terms of the level and finesse of the engraving present, and having these separate rather than having to cut these out for the folds or join them for the complete wing is really nice. This is the forward gear bay with some great recessed work across it. These are the end panels for the weapons bay, which also look great. As well as supplying two sets of wings, Airfix also gives you open and closed bomb bay doors, so no misalignment problems here. This is that box and spar unit I mentioned before, which is very solid, as it needs to be for this model I feel. These are the two weight bins, only one of which is referenced. And then on to one of my surprise favourite parts of this kit, the weapons bay. Honestly, I am very impressed on how much detail Airfix have represented here in just one single piece. The cockpit floor in close-up doesn't look quite as impressive, but the fact it's one piece is. Most of the detail then comes from the stations, sidewalls, etc. What detail there is here though is pretty good. These two pieces are the sidewall inserts for the front landing gear bay. And now we come to the fuselage. I think it's fairly obvious, but Airfix have done a fantastic job here of capturing the weird contours of the Gannet and giving us exquisite detail across its outer hull. One strange thing, however, is the odd appearance of the pin ejector marks on the inner hull. More on those on my upcoming build video. If you're not already convinced to go out and buy one of these kits right now, then I'm guessing you either already have or you never will. This is Airfix at the top of its game in terms of design and engineering, and they really do have to be applauded. I believe this is Paramjit's design, and I hope he is getting congratulated by what he's done here. Beyond that, just the wealth of build options here is really fantastic. Airfix are spoiling us in this regard. You could buy 3 of these kits and not have a single one of them have common build options between them, which is just nuts. Despite that, I have some misgivings here. The instructions are, for me, a backward step from the Sea King. Cramming them into 10 pages was, again in my opinion, a mistake. Whether that was to cut costs because of the range of options in the plastic to hit a price point, I don't know, but I would have paid a couple of pounds more for this kit to have Sea King level instructions. At least, I hope that's the reason this isn't a sign of future things to come. The crew also don't do it for me either. I think that they're far too generic, and with their sync marks, I'd rather they had saved the money here and spent it on the instructions instead. Sorry to all you pilot people out there, but there it is. The other perpetual worry is QC. Once again, a random production kit has a fault, and whilst it was small and arguably you could use the other canopy, get a replacement, etc., it just detracts from the overall experience. The sync marks in the crew and the weird ejection pin effects on the fuselage also make me wonder about how this kit is actually produced in the factory. The tooling is obviously excellent, but how that is used is still very much an open question for me. I'll keep saying it every time I see it, but Airfix needs to get a grip on their QC, as it's just taking the lustre off the fantastic efforts of the rest of the team, which isn't what they deserve. Anyway, these are really general Airfix issues rather than Gannet specific ones, which means I don't have any hesitation at all in saying, go and buy this now. It's a superb kit, and, spoiler alert, having started building it already, it does go together very well indeed. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.